everyone, welcome to my little tutorial on how to paint a watercolor of this red pepper. And I found this image on unsplash.com, where everything you download there is copyright free to use. And I really like it to find reference material. So what I did was I drew my pepper to my 140-pound watercolor paper, and I believe this is hot pressed, not cold pressed, so it won't have, it'll be a smooth surface and not the surface with a texture on it. So I'm going to the right of my pepper here, and I literally put a wet wash down, avoiding the white part altogether. And I'm going to start painting in a red that matches from my paints the red of the pepper as close as I can. I'm not sure what color it actually was, but I do use Mission Gold paints right now for this tutorial. So I'm sorry that my camera is focusing on my hand as I bring it in. I think the next video segment is better, but you can still see that I am putting down pretty thick paint. First I put a light wash down just to get an idea and just having it wet. So you kind of want it wet all the way up to the light spot, and I kind of put a tiny tint in there just so I could see where it is, because I have a hard time seeing where it is if it's just plain water. And then I popped in the closest match color of red I could find in my palette, and it's very thick. So I'm going right up to that little spot in the middle where it's a line, and I am putting some paint down, and I'm letting the water kind of carry it over to the white spot of the pepper. And then I'm just going to keep adding a little bit of water on the edge of that just to keep it soft. So you have the hard edge in the middle of the pepper, and the side of the white area where the highlight is, it's very harsh here, you have a soft line. So you want to keep that soft line on the wet side. So it wants to bleed in there and get really soft, but you want to keep controlling it and make sure it doesn't bleed too much or make a bloom in there. And I just keep working it slowly and adding, here I'm adding a little bit less pigment and more water on the bottom because it's just a little bit less intense in that area. And I just keep working this until I feel I've got a pretty close match to the image. So I felt this was a really great exercise for you to learn how to create highlights and work with shadow and work with an intense color in watercolor. And here I am, I'm trying to keep my whites edge smooth. So we're in watercolor, you always want to work from light to dark, and you want to try to keep the white of the paper as your highlights instead of adding white, because the white paint will actually dull the paint and it won't look like a highlight. It'll just look sort of like a smudge in watercolor. So here I am adding this intense red to the edge. So there's no water on the edge of there, so it's not going to bleed anywhere. So when you're adding a thick paint to a dry edge, it's going to be very clean. If you're adding wet paint to a wet edge, it's going to bleed in. So it really won't go beyond the wet area that you created inside the pepper area. So here I have the edge coming in, and I've got a good on the right side of that highlight. It's pretty soft. It's actually looking really good here. So I'm just going to carefully keep going around. I think I have a number 4 round brush here, and the brush I'm using is it's actually a travel brush. It closes up, and I really love it. I have to tell you the name of it. I'll put it down below in the video. If you're liking my watercolor videos, please like it. Give me that little thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. It really helps me out so I can create more videos for you. So, a lot of people are afraid to try watercolors because they think it's very unforgiving. So, when you're painting with acrylic paints, you can paint from dark to light and you add white in the end for your highlights. And you can always go over any mistakes you make. And people think that you can't do this in watercolor. I just feel like just go and get a Canson watercolor paper, 140 pound. It's not that expensive, and just make mistake after mistake after mistake, because the more you play with the watercolors, the more you're going to learn how it works and how you work with it and what is good for you and your hand and your marks. And I am showing you techniques here, and everybody's different, so your watercolors are not going to look like mine, like anybody else's, because everybody's different. But you will, if you learn the techniques of watercolor, just like learning the piano or anything new, riding a bike, once you've learned it, you can do whatever you want. You're going to be really great at it, but it takes practice. So every time I stop practicing my watercolors, it's almost like I need to just do a few hours of practice just to get back to my level where I was before. And I'm always discovering new things with it. And I think it's a really fun, beautiful medium. So here I am, and I'm pretty much done with this right segment of this pear. Now, this pepper. I think that if you got a pear or you got an apple or you've gotten any kind of vegetable that's in front of you, just draw it and look at those shapes and pencil in the shadows and pencil in the highlights very lightly, and just try to create smooth edges next to soft edges next to harsh edges. And that's and when you're looking at something and comparing, I feel like observing things, real objects with your painting, you're going to really master this medium pretty fast. Once I was happy with that first section there to the right, you have to let it dry completely. Please let your watercolors dry completely before you go on to another section. Otherwise, it's going to bleed in, and all that beautiful hard work you did, you're going to make a mistake and you're going to be upset about it. So just please let it dry completely, and this way you can move into the next section. So I'm deciding, I guess, here that the highlight area is not pure white. I left a little pure white, but I also put a slightly light glaze in there of a very light, the reddish color. I really watered it down a lot, and after I watered it down, I got it to the color I needed, or the shade, the hue, and the shade that I needed it to be light. I took the water off my brush and then got that color in there and just added that highlight in a slightly off white. Once you put that darker color next to it, of course, it's going to appear white because of the color that's next to it is so vibrant and dark. It's going to make that highlight actually appear white. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to color in that whole side there up to that highlight to the right there, and we're going to put in the pure color, and then we're going to dab in some of that darker color in the middle. And I'm taking my red and I'm adding either a little teeny bit of green to it or brown to it, so it makes that deep red shadow area. I'm going in right here and I'm softening up the edges near the highlight with water, or adding the red as I need it. So I'm going to fill in the whole right side with some water, a lighter wash of color so I can see where I'm going. I'm going to fill it in with my light red watery wash, and I'm going to let it sit for a minute so it kind of sinks in. You don't want this wash to be super wet where it's a puddle. You really want it to saturate your paper and kind of sink in so that you can add more color to it, and it's going to bleed really beautifully without creating a bloom, and it's not going to be too puddly where it's going to run off anywhere. And I'm going to mix up I'm going to add my pure red in the middle there. You can see the closer to the highlights, it's almost an orangey red. And when you get to the shadow side of it, it's the the pure red color, and then you add a teeny bit of green to it. So you use the complement color to create a sort of a brown mix to create the shadow area. I added the outer edge to this pepper. And I have to say, years ago when I started my graphic design packaging, I had worked for food companies and I had to paint a lot of fruits and vegetables. And I did a lot with watercolor and I used color pencil on top too. But having nowadays, you can pretty much find a lot of this resource online. But back then, because I graduated in 1984 from art school, um, we literally did it in marker renderings first to show the client, and then we'd have to do the finished piece later on. So I was kind of used to painting a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of fruits, strawberries and mint and things like that for my clients. And so here I am going back and just checking my edges and checking my highlights and my shadow areas. And in the highlights, there's some, lighter values and some bright, bright whites. So I'm just kind of going in and checking it while it's wet. Like, you need to make sure that the area is wet to the touch, or you can see it. If you look at it at an angle, you can see there's a little sheen on it. You want it to be slightly absorbed into the paper, but not have any puddles while you do this. And you can add color to it as needed, and you can soften the edges, and you really have a lot of playtime here. It's not like it, you think that you can make a mistake, because you really have a lot of playtime here to move and manipulate the colors around. Now I decided to glaze over the area we worked on before because I felt it needed to be slightly darker there. And you have to, that area was already dry. So now this is called a glaze, and I'm just going back and I'm comparing my photo with my art. And what I really love about watercolor painting is you can make it look super realistic, and yet you will always see the person's hand in there and the person's strokes and their marks. And that's what makes watercolors so beautiful. I suggest practicing a lot on, I use this Canson XL. It's called 140 pound 300G paper, and it's really great for practicing. But once you've practiced all of your drills and all of your little practice sessions with color and edges and all that, get a better paper, like an Arches paper. And now this is Arches 140 pound hot press. And I did most of my illustration work on hot press because I didn't want to see the texture in a lot of it, and neither did the clients. So I feel that when you're using a cheaper paper and a cheaper paint, you're not going to get the results you would with the highest quality paint that you can afford and the highest quality paper you can afford. But do your practice sessions on something that's less expensive. Now, I got this paper at Walmart and Michael's or your craft store, and it's pretty prevalent. You can get it on Amazon. And I think it's great for practice, but when you're going to do your final piece and you've worked out all of the problems and you've tried it a few times, do it on the more expensive paper, and you're going to be very happy in general. So now I'm just going to finish up this right side of the pepper, and I'm just going through and I'm just observing that photo and my work, and I am either adding or subtracting to it. I'm just adding some more darks or a little softening with a wet brush until I am happy with the way the side of the pepper is looking. All right, so I'm done with the right side, and I'm going to flip my painting around, and I'm going to start adding my light green colors to paint in the green stem of this pepper. So my color is a yellow with a little bit of green added, and it's sort of a mustard green color that I created here. And it might be a little yellow ochre with a little yellow, and I'm going to put my lightest lights in first, and we're going to build up to our darkest values of green and local color. I'm washing in the yellow, and I'm adding in a little bit, dotting in some sap green and some darker greens to create that shadow area of the stem. And I'm just using pretty thick paint, and then I'm going back in it with a little water to soften up the edges, just like we did on the other red part of the pepper. So we painted in a warm yellowish green color there for the highlights of the stem. And now I'm adding a little bit of a cooler green. It's sort of like a, like a Kelly green. So it's a little bit less on the warm side, but not completely to the blue side. And I'm going around and I'm just painting anywhere I see in that stem that is that like that grass green color. And when you see a shadow, Usually it's going to be in the cool side because when the sun is hitting something, it's going to be warm. So the sun's rays are warm and yellow and gold, but the shadow side of most objects are going to be cooler. So we're going to add a cooler color to that to create that illusion of having a shadow. Here I added a little teeny bit of the red to the stem, so I like to have a cohesive painting. So I see, and green, when you add red to green, you're creating a gray color or a muddy color, and that is a great color to add to the shadow. So if you have a cool green and you're gonna add the red to it, you're gonna get a really great shadow color. Also letting the paint mix on the canvas instead of mixing it on my palette. Sometimes I really like the way watercolors looks when you don't mix it in the palette, but you're mixing the colors or you're letting it mix naturally on the paper from adding two colors together that will mix together. And I think it makes a vibrant, beautiful, kind of a glowing painting. I'm adding some really dark shadows here, so I probably took my green and I added some red to it in my palette. So this dark green I actually mixed in my palette. I might have made little indigo blue in there, and I really added that dark shade to that stem. And I'm going back and I'm painting the last part of the pepper here with the red, and we already did this. So really, really look at that reference that you have and notice that there's some solid color of the red there, and we're going to soften it up in the little highlight shape the way we did before. And here we are again on the other side of the pepper, the little spot in the back that we have to fill in, and we're doing the same exact thing, adding the dark and adding a little soft edge to the highlight area. One edge might be harsh and one edge might be soft, but this part here, because it's the back of the pepper, we're gonna actually fill it in with a little bit of color, because we want the front to come forward and the back to recede. So we're going to make sure the highlight in the front is a bright white and the highlight in the back is a little bit more subdued. Now I'm just going to go around with my brush and a fine brush and add those little details, the little lines and the little, just the perfect details to create the illusion of, almost realistic. I don't like my paintings to be super realistic, but I like them to be representational. So I'm just going to add these little dots and line work and marks here and there with my darks and colors, and just like tidy up the painting and add those tiny details to really make the painting pop. So as I'm finishing up my touches, I want to just say thank you so much for staying with me all this time and following through with this painting. I'm sure if you sit here and practice drawing a pepper and painting it in the way I've showed you, just keep practicing, and I promise you that you will get better every time. So I'm going to put the comparison of the original photo to the finished piece up, and I'm actually really pleased with it. I think it looks like a beautiful watercolor, and I can use this for commercial projects or just to make a poster or do anything I like with it. So thank you again, and I hope I see you in the next video. Please like and share, and I'll see you again.